I'd like to welcome our friends from the Cebu Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Charles Kenneth Go. Sir, good morning. And also the President of the Davao Chamber of Commerce, John Carlo Tria.
Morning.
Sirs, thank you for making time for the Manila Times. This is one of our initiatives really to talk to business leaders all over the country, to get the pulse of the entire or the national business community. Maybe if we can begin by telling us maybe how you are. The year, we're still in the first quarter. This is the beginning of March, but maybe tell us how you are. What are the big things that we are expecting from each chamber? Maybe we can start with Mr. Ko. Good morning, sir. How's the Cebu Chamber?
Good morning, Dante. Thank you for having us. It's our pleasure to be with Manila Times. We always look forward to these conversations. It's not the first time we're having this, and we do appreciate having this platform to be able to reach a wider audience in terms of what we're doing as a chamber. So we're rather optimistic right now, even though since the new administration took over, we're pleasantly surprised actually with the results and with the progress that has been done, especially in Cebu. We have our mayors and governors are all working together for the betterment of the community. So we're starting to see a lot of public and private partnerships that's been very fruitful. It has been very helpful, especially during the pandemic, wherein people lost their jobs, and so the government, or even after the typhoon with Odette, the government came up with a lot of programs, and these programs also effectively limited the impact of the after effects of the typhoon. So people were able to rebuild their houses, people were able to rebuild their businesses, and that was a very important milestone after having a very responsive and quick response. And so now we have different challenges now as a chamber. So as we all know, we're seeing this high inflation going on and interest rates. So these are forefront right now in the minds of businessmen. So we hope that these things will be our government will be able to keep it under control within the year.
Yeah, I think the president was just in Cebu yesterday or a couple of days ago.
Yes, that's for the Bus Rapid Transit. This has been like 4 or 5 years in the making. Wow. And so finally, it has ground break. So we hope that will ease the traffic. As I think a lot of people heard that traffic's already as bad as Manila here. But
very challenging. Mr. Tria, speaking of traffic, I was in Davao in December. If that's an indication of progress, I hope it's not. There's also a lot of traffic now in Davao also, but Davao was the center of the national focus when President Duterte was in Malacanang. Did it keep up that momentum, or how are you now? How's Davao Chamber?
Okay, by and large, first of all, good morning to everyone. We'd like to thank you for this opportunity. My courtesies to my co-president Kenneth, and the rest of our mga kaigsuunan sa dakbayan sa Cebu. Basically, ang Mindanao economy as a whole performed better than the national economy, both during the pandemic and immediately after. During the pandemic, its contraction was only 5.7% compared to the country at 9.5% in 2020. Then in the year after, we grew at 6.1%, which is higher than the nation's 5.7%. I think it indicates a resilience.
Okay.
Owing maybe to the fact that we produce food and we're able to manage food inflation, particularly during that time. Regarding traffic, it's kind of abated now. I think that was Christmas traffic we really experienced last December. But definitely, we're also looking at a new bus system, which our mayor announced, which will also ease traffic and maybe provide better transport, no, for our citizens. So I guess the momentum remains strong. The the intent to partner up with Mindanao businesses remains high, especially from our foreign counterparts. We recently hosted the delegation from the Czech Republic and signed MOUs with business groups both in China and India. So this, I guess, shows us that there is an interest, and we're more than happy to pursue it, no, for the benefit of making our economy even more resilient.
And Mr. Tria, just you just returned. We were talking earlier before we started. You just returned from India, where you partnered with your counterparts there. Maybe tell us about that, because that sounds exciting. That you are, not many people, I think, appreciate that Davao Chamber has many international partners already. But tell us about India.
Yeah, basically the intent is to partner up because maybe many countries like India see Mindanao as a good market. At the same time, we also look forward to possible investment, especially in manufacturing. As you know, Mindanao is a source of many raw materials. We produce 40% of the country's food. We also have extensive mineral resources. And I think inviting investments to process this will make the economy even more resilient. I think that's the intention. Besides, the strategic position of the Davao region in the Pacific is, I think, also what encourages many foreign groups to look at Davao as a possible investment site. We face the Pacific Ocean, and in terms of ASEAN, we're actually a port city that is very close compared to other countries. No, we're very close to Shanghai, Yokohama, and of course the continental United States. So I think that kind of geographic advantage is being examined at the moment.
Yeah, Mr. Ko said he was pleasantly surprised with the government's direction. What are you hearing from your members, or what's your view about the direction this country is going in?
I think our government knows the current problems that we're facing, because lately, the other night we had a meeting. We had also a roundtable with the Department of Trade of Industry with Secretary Pascual during the visit of President BBM. So and also recently we've also been tapped by Senator Gatchalian and Senator Villanueva for the Tech Walk workshop, which is hopefully going to come up with new programs that will upskill our workers. So as I said, we're seeing more private and public collaborations for the betterment of the programs that the government will be rolling out.
Yeah, Mr. Ko, what are some of the opportunities that people should know about in Cebu when it comes to investments? What are the sectors that you are most excited about, or the chamber is most excited about, and that people like us in Manila and maybe outside the Philippines should be looking at? What are the opportunities there that we should be aware of?
Well, I would I would like to preface the opportunities are also being, say, as you know, we're lagging behind in FDI. I'm glad to hear that Davao has a lot of investments coming in because of the rich and natural resources. Well,
they have more land also.
yes. So Cebu, before in the 80s, 90s, we had a boom in our PEZA, export processing zone. But in the last few years, we haven't seen a lot of locators coming in. So one of our lament is after we know that a lot of factories, when COVID happened, a lot of factories came out of China and transferred their regional production to Vietnam, Thailand, and other Asian countries, but only a trickle came into the Philippines. So I know our government is aware of that, and there's still a lot of things we need to do to be competitive vis-a-vis our Asian neighbors. So in terms of investment, to answer your question, what's going quite strongly in Cebu is BPOs. Although,
BPOs.
yeah, but not just Cebu, but I think the area for expansion is more now in Central Visayas. Because I think Cebu, like what's being experienced in Manila, is having saturation already because you have only a limited number of workers. So I guess for the rest of Central Visayas, it's still also right for BPOs.
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Mr. Tria? What are some of the opportunities you mentioned that you're talking to a lot of people? Are there any particular sectors that people should be aware about that that you would like to promote?
Okay, we have some low-hanging fruits.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, no, you asked about the momentum. And in particular, we've seen the construction now of many township property developments.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The significance of these townships is that they provide a ready platform for the entry of new investments, especially in the tech sector, no? Yung mga BPO-ready buildings and connected work and living spaces, no? And I think some of them, these are 20-hectare large township developments that combine commercial and residential spaces. And this is what is encouraging actually a lot of investment, because when they see that Davao has these facilities already, then it provides a push. Secondly, we know that Davao is a gateway to the larger Mindanao economy of 25 million, and in particular, the BIM-IAGA economy, Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines growth area, of which Davao is the northernmost port. So basically, that's Davao's leverage in attracting investor interest, no? And I think it's accelerated over the last 5 years. That's why if you notice when you were here, the skyline of Davao is changing.
Yes,
No?
rapidly.
When you fly in, you're seeing a lot of vertical properties going up. And I think the pandemic might have slowed that a bit, but it's continuing at the moment.
Right. Right. What about agriculture? Because the president has given a lot of attention to agriculture, right? What's going on in that sector in your part of the country? I know when the president went to China, for instance, they were talking about durian. Of course, when we talk about durian, we think about Mindanao. But what's going on in that sector where you're from?
You're asking me?
Sure. Let's start with you, Mr. Tria.
Okay, basically, we all know Davao is really the center of export agriculture. Now, this is where our agribusiness enterprises engaged in exports are headquartered. No? The banana and pineapple, which are some of our largest fresh exports. And we're also the largest coconut producer as a region, which is also the balance of our agri-exports. Of course, there are manufactured products already like coconut oil. I think there's a lot of innovation that will be coming in that will further expand, and hopefully with new investments coming in and the economic reforms actually of the last administration, like the CREATE law, the amended Foreign Investment and Public Service Act, it opened the doors to greater foreign ownership of the processing and manufacturing companies. And I think that's what we will need to look at, maybe look at how government can further spread the opportunity, especially to areas like Cebu and Davao. In our case, we're interested really in attracting more manufacturing investments that can capitalize on the resources we grow.
Any particular specifics on manufacturing? I think you're in that business, right? So, but is it automobiles? Is it computers? Is it food manufacturing? And anything that's what's a low-hanging fruit there? Do you think?
Okay, basically, ang coconut, no, being the largest coconut producer, having more manufacturing in coconut will actually create more opportunity, especially in areas outside of Davao where a lot of the coconuts are grown. This will create a new market for the producers, no, new buyers
Mhm.
It should also create more opportunity for them. Like for example, there are now opportunities in processing apart from copra. We're seeing a bigger market now for coconut water, desiccated coconut. I mean, with the pandemic, a lot of people started cooking at home. And so you see a lot of them using coconut products, no? Especially those interested in Asian food.
Yeah.
And we'd like to really boost that further.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've reported that a lot of larger business groups have forayed now into agribusiness, particularly
Yeah.
agro-processing. So that's a low-hanging fruit, which I believe will create a lot of inclusiveness.
Good. Mr. Ko, is agriculture, I'm sorry, I'm a bit ignorant about the composition of the your chamber, but is that a big sector that you're looking at for Cebu?
I'm afraid even with the regional development plan, agricultural produce is not a big contributor for Cebu. Cebu's economy really is more trade and services dependent. So
Tourism probably
yes,
also.
Yes. So in relation to that, I'd also like to share, if you've heard of our mayor's been dancing this tune of Singapore like Cebu. So actually, there's also a lot of opportunities there for public and private partnership, because in terms of, say, infrastructure such as what we call the MRBs, medium rise buildings. So there's already been a pilot project done by the Cebu City government and Cebu Landmaster, where they provided this tenement housing, which is like a temporary housing for the informal settlers who will be affected by the clearing of the waterways. So it's I think because of the urbanization and the growth that Cebu has experienced in the past few years, we've had this urban problem. So
Yeah.
I think we're and the infrastructure hasn't caught up with that. So we need to invest in water treatment, housing, and even garbage disposal.
Your problems are like the problems in Manila.
yeah, precisely.
So tourism is an interesting, well, you mentioned earlier BPOs, Mr. Kono, and then
yes, tourism is another big factor for Cebu.
Yeah.
And it's not just I would also like to emphasize that I think the tourism direction now is like to create a Filipino brand of hospitality, and also to have the tourists not just visit Cebu and Bohol, because these two are quite linked close together. You have tourists coming in from Korea going to Bohol and going to Cebu, but they also need to explore, because Cebu also has a lot of beauty in terms of mountains and other beach resorts that are further outside of Mactan. And so this will also be a key in bringing job opportunities to the rural areas, so that our farmers and fishermen can also have alternative livelihood, like what happened with the whale shark. So instead of the fishermen fishing, they've already gone into tourism, and so they actually make a lot more income doing tourism than doing fishing.
I see. Now you mentioned that some of the problems sounds very familiar to us. Traffic, garbage disposal, and water sanitation. Are these? Do you see opportunities there for investments as well? I know there are problems, but do you see them? Do you think they are ripe enough for opportunity for investment opportunities?
Yes, definitely, because our government alone has also limited funds. So right now we're also working. The chamber sits on the Cebu City Development Council, so we're privy to all this. The direction of the Cebu City to also entice investors to come in and partner with the government to be able to provide these public services, but also for a fee, so the investors can also get their ROIs.
Right. So let's turn to what concerns you, Mr. Ko. Let's start with you, because you mentioned earlier inflation. We had the economic forum yesterday. Everyone we talked to mentioned inflation, and they cite us as one of their biggest concerns for the year. Obviously, Cebu Chamber is thinking about that. But what are the other things what are the other things that you're keeping an eye on besides inflation from your end? That will have an impact on maybe on business in Cebu?
It's already starting to have an impact. There's been after post pandemic, we were expecting a rebound, but I guess the rebound has been limited, especially to revenge tourism. You see, when there's a travel sale, people are flocking to the travel sale. But within the local economy, we're seeing a wait and see attitude. So they're like the condominium developments, a lot of the real estate developments have been put on hold. So because I guess people are watching out for the interest rates, because now it's buyers are, if you're going to buy a house or a condominium, it's going to cost more for investors to get a bank loan. So that's having a ripple effect down the line. So even contractors are we used to have a problem with not enough labor. Now there's more workers that are looking for jobs now, especially in the construction sector.
And in Davao, what are some of the things that concern you? Of course, the inflation is one of them, but what are the other things that you've been hearing from your members?
Well, I share the concern of Kenneth, about inflation, and basically the trend I think needs to be really addressed, because high inflation means higher costs of living, and we eat into margins of many of our members, especially the small businesses, because they cannot readily pass on the cost. Maybe I just like to add na Davao by and large is a service economy. Although compared to other regions, the share of agriculture, fishery, and forestry is just a bit higher, but it's still a service economy by and large. That's why a lot of our members are engaged and also in service businesses. So we share the concern, and I think government will need to really address the inflation concern, because having high interest rates is not good for a developing economy.
Bad for investments.
It's very bad, because that means our borrowing costs will go up, and that also, I agree, creates a ripple effect down the line. One thing we are encouraged about is our government agencies, both local and national, are pushing their digitalization programs. And I think that will help make business processes faster. We just had a forum actually last Friday, where we invited the business bureau, the building official, to talk more about their digitalization programs. And so this kind of dialogue between government and the business sector is something we are constantly pursuing.
Mr. Ko, you were going to say something?
Yes, in line with what John has said, because what we're also seeing, the inflation that we're experiencing is what I would say not the usual inflation, because it's not caused by consumption. We don't see an excess consumption or an excess economic activity. It's not because normally they would increase interest rates, so businesses do not expand, but we're not actually seeing that kind of problem. So I guess I guess the government's effort to increase interest rates is more of they're trying to keep up with the federal exchange increases to temper the rise of the peso. So I guess that should be something our macroeconomic managers should take a look. Otherwise, it's going to although if you look at the GDP numbers, we're seeing very high GDP numbers, 7-8%, but I don't know, like from our members' perspective, we don't actually feel that which is kind of what I call there's some disconnect in terms of those numbers.
Interesting. Mr. Tria,
I'd like to add a bit, I think a lot of the inflation is really driven by high fuel costs. Imported fuel is actually driving up the way I see it, and of course our basket of goods. We look at the inflation number, half of it is really food and transport. So I think in connection to what you asked me earlier, we'd like to really see more renewable sources of energy, not only in powering our homes and businesses, but also driving our mobility. Because this will actually help lower the cost of transport, no? And I think some of our members already indicated a desire to refleet their transport fleets with electric vehicles. The only concern is that they need to see more of the charging infrastructure implemented throughout the island, because they are having a difficult time mediating the volatile fuel prices. It's
Yeah.
not easy to pass it on to customers. They
Yeah.
will absorb it first to the best that they can, but there will really be a breaking point. So I think the long term is really to electrify our or to make, well, to source it from renewable sources,
Yeah.
electrify our homes and our mobility. That will help mediate inflation in the long term. Whatever government is doing now are really just monetary tools.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree with Kenneth. Thank you.
What about something we heard yesterday also at our economic forum? Ease of doing business. People keep bringing that up. But my question is this: we already have an ease of business doing law. Obviously, the government is, not just this government, but even the Duterte government was working a lot on reducing red tape. But we still hear about it. And the question is, what more needs to be done to make business easier? We were talking to the president of SMIC yesterday, and his comment was for the government to make it easier for businessmen to do business. He said it's still hard, But what's your experience there? Let's start with Mr. Ko. Do you see that do you see other things that can be done to make businesses or doing business easier in the Philippines? What else can be done?
What I would agree with what John said about digitalization.
Yeah,
So
that's a big part.
Yes. So instead of having to file your permits manually or having to go to their offices, so I think our government is moving in the right direction in terms of asking the LG, not just the national agencies, but also the LGUs to move their processing to digital, and also even to accept digital payments as well. So, and ARTA, I'm glad to also report that we also recently met them, and they've opened up an office in Cebu, and I hope they do also roll out their offices throughout the country, because each locality have their own unique set of problems. And recently we also held a forum with the Bureau of Fire, because we've heard a lot of members having issues with
The permit.
permits, because when they get inspected, they're asked to put this, put that, but when they already got their permits last year, how come this year there's another set of rules? So it's also not a lot of business people know that there was a new law that was passed, and for all of us to comply. So that's also something that we should also be concerned about.
Okay, Mr. Tria.
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned earlier, the forum also included the Bureau of Fire last Friday.
Okay.
So I guess the intention and the effort is there.
Yeah.
So we're encouraging our members and the business community to engage it further. I think one important note that I noted from Friday was we'll have to really read a lot of the regulations to see how well they are implemented. So that goes for, especially for the national government agencies, because at the local government level, it's much easier to engage. When you talk to the national agencies, and I'm sure Kenneth knows this, a lot of the mandates come from the head offices. And oftentimes we would get explanations that it will take time to implement because it will take a large-scale mandate from the head office. So that's something that we will also engage. In particular, we are my own position is, like, for example, in the Bureau of Customs, we'd like to see the national single window implemented. This will help facilitate easier trade, especially between us and our immediate neighbors. Kasi as you know, Davao, we're trying to push more direct shipping linkages with our immediate neighbors in Indonesia and Malaysia. And I would think having the national single window will be a good move towards really increasing the ease of doing business, especially in the import and export.
What is the national single window? Is that like a one-stop shop or?
Yes, it's really a single window between countries. Maybe if you talk to the Bureau of Customs, they can present it further.
Okay.
It will actually help make the process of shipment and declaration more streamlined.
Yeah, I know one of our speakers yesterday was complaining that I think the Danish ambassador that that's one of the problems that he mentioned when he was talking about the ease of doing business in the Philippines. Sometimes the national policies are there, but the other agencies, like particularly customs, don't align quickly with the directives from the national government. Yeah. So
But I can safely say that that's one of the benefits of the pandemic. It really accelerated digitalization. So
yeah.
we'd like to see I will foresee that proceeding even further.
Yeah. Well,
I would,
yes, go ahead, Mr.
yeah,
Ko.
yeah, I would tend to agree with John because there's also something that our chamber is pushing as an advocacy also for the cost for the online, so that basically now when you import something, when it arrives, the customs will question everything, your valuation, your invoices, because they don't believe what's on the paper. So if you have a single window, so that it's being, so if the information is already coming from the exporting country, so it means that it's already verified. So that when it reaches here, it's only a matter of paying the right taxes, and then your shipment is already can be released, instead of having to there's this different lanes wherein if your cargo has to be open, so you have to wait for when it's going to be opened, and you end up having to pay storage charges because you're waiting for the customs officers to inspect your container, etc.
Yeah, similar process. Sounds familiar. One other issue that we heard yesterday was the need for more reforms in education. I guess they were talking in the context about, that there's still a job mismatch and that maybe the pandemic set us back quite a bit. From your end, I mean, are there similar concerns that you're hearing about with regard to mismatch, the quality of the workforce? And let's start with Mr. Ko. I mean, how important is education reform to your chamber?
It's I would say, like, currently, even in our healthcare sector, we're if you go to a hospital and you try to get if you need to be you need to get a room, there are actually rooms available, but the problem is there are not enough nurses.
Yeah.
Yes, and you also see in the statistics there's a decline in enrollment, but the decline in enrollment is not caused by the lack of interest, but it's actually caused by lack of teachers. So it's we're starting to see a global problem, because it's like, because of the pandemic and digital, or it's like the world has become smaller. So, like, there are job opportunities easily for nurses to go into other countries, and I think it's also the same. And in terms of education, I would agree that I think the private sector needs to step up. It's not. I think our government is doing its best, but I think that we need to move into a direction wherein there's internship, because I think that's the best way for our
more collaboration between schools and industries. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that one.
Okay, Mr. Tria, what about you? I mean, I know the vice president is also the secretary of education, and she gave a very bleak report about the status of basic ed in the Philippines. But what's the chamber's view about the reforms needed?
Well, I think increased investment, particularly in tertiary education, is going to be welcome, because this is what will really align the skills, no? Because as a chamber, we noted from our members that there really is a need for more skilled workers in Mindanao, and I think having more investments, particularly in post-secondary education and in tertiary education. I think there was a law passed in 2018 that allows more foreign ownership in the tertiary education sector and encourages partnerships with foreign schools. I think this is important to bring in the new knowledge and technology that can also help make our local private education sector more competitive. So that's something that we will need to look at. It's something currently in process within our chamber. We just received
Yeah.
a lot of feedback on how a lot of the skills programs have been implemented. So we will be engaging TESDA maybe and the CHED further. Now,
Yeah.
as far as academic partnerships is concerned, the Innovation Act of 2018 really encourages a lot of partnerships with academe. But I think we will really need to see this implemented further by the DTI so that the kind of, for example, thesis and dissertation topics being pushed are more aligned to what the industry would probably want to do research on. And that kind of collaboration is really going to be helpful. We've seen it work in our neighboring countries. We'd like to have more of it here.
Yeah. Let me move now to something else. The president a couple of weeks ago said that the many foreign trips that he's been making are starting to bear fruit. I think he mentioned that there were about 35 trillion pesos worth of pledges that were made, and some of those pledges are already are already materializing. What's your sense from where you are? Are you seeing this all in your area, or is it just the Metro Manila that is benefiting? Mr. Tria, what's your sense?
Okay, in previous articles I've written, I've already called for the regional development councils to make investment promotion and capture part of the annual agenda.
Okay.
Maybe if there is, I'm sure Kenneth is familiar with this. I'm sure you sit in the RDC. We really need to make investment promotion and capture maybe a committee in the Regional Development Council so that it can set targets and maybe engage the agencies like the BOI and the FIRB, the Fiscal Incentives Review Board, and maybe even the Philippine Economic Zone Authority to really encourage so that the regions can be part of, for example, investment roadshows,
Yeah.
para ang opportunities, they can also look at our region as a location for investments. So for me, these are already implementation issues, out of the CREATE law and the laws I mentioned earlier. We will be engaging these agencies further on that.
I see. Mr. Ko, you were saying earlier that there was a drop in PEZA locators in Cebu, but have you seen any improvements? We know with what the pledges that the president received in his trips abroad. I mean, are you seeing any of the fruits there?
Part of the pledges are also ongoing programs or existing current expansion plans of existing companies who are already located in the Philippines or in Cebu. So we're seeing some of that roll out. But although that's good to note, it's really when we compare the numbers between countries, that's where you see the disparity. And I guess we shouldn't just be content with seeing all these signings that we have, because I think there's really a much bigger pie out there that we can still try to get more share of.
I see.
And in relation to what John said with the Regional Development Council, we're also seeing a disconnect, and I hope our government officials can also see that or I guess as John mentioned, we need to engage more because from the Regional Development Council we do endorsements, but when it gets to Congress, it doesn't get, not all the projects gets the priority funding. I think in Congress they have another set of priorities or something. So I guess further engagement will probably align more of our both public and private interests.
I see. Interesting. Talking about things from abroad. A lot of people from our previous event mentioned, of course, the things that are going on in Ukraine. That's creating uncertainty. Of course, closer to home, we have China, but the president was recently in Beijing in January. There were a lot of pledges signed there, but of course, what's been going on for many years now is this tension also in the West Philippine Sea is there concern that maybe, you know, all of these initiatives to bring in investors from China, to open up, you know, business relations with China, that, you know, this will be impacted by, you know, the geopolitical problems that we've been seeing for many years now, or and in some cases maybe seems to be intensifying, especially with, you know, recent incidents like the laser pointing incident with the Coast Guard. Is there any fear, Mr. Ko? What do you think?
Unfortunately, it comes with strings attached. So,
Oh, okay.
so as you, the investments that we're seeing coming from China are like individual investors who are coming in, but the big government corporations wouldn't come in without the go signal of the head of China. So that will always be that will be an issue. So we do need, I guess China wants us to go and sit down and discuss it one-on-one. So I don't, I wouldn't know if that's a good idea or not. So
Mr. Tria?
Well, you know, trade is a constant in any
Mm.
situation, and I think it should be allowed to, you know, to prosper despite any situation. I mean, we've already seen our relationships over hundreds of years, regardless of who colonized us. Our relationship with our neighbors has been the same. In particular, in Mindanao, you know, we've had a strong historical trade relationship with China, with the regions we now call Indonesia and Malaysia.
Yeah.
And so despite whatever political arrangements there are, I think the trade should always continue.
Mm-hmm.
That's because at the end of the day, and since you mentioned it, and I'm sure Kenneth will agree with me, building a resilient local economy is always the best hedge against uncertainty. No, if we can trade well, if we can manage local inflation well, that will keep the business growing and growing. So even if it doesn't grow as fast as we want, as long as continuous ang growth and we can manage whatever, it will help us manage uncertainties.
Yeah. And related to that, you know, the Philippines recently ratified RCEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Are you excited about that? I mean, are there opportunities you see there? But of course, it's not just China, but also Japan, Australia, New Zealand, South Korea, and of course, all of us. And are you excited about opportunities there? I mean, what's the talk? And Davao Chamber first.
Well, it hasn't really been a topic of discussion, but definitely, for me, you know, having trade relationships and engaging in trade arrangements will always create opportunities for investment partnership. And I think that is where I'll go back to what I mentioned earlier. At the regional level, at the level of the regional development councils and with our fellow neighboring chambers of commerce, this is where the investment capture will be needed so that we can create the kind of investments that will make or encourage and attract the kind of investments that will allow us to be more resilient moving forward.
Okay, Mr. Ko, about RCEP, does that excite you, or
Yeah,
it's only us in Manila who are excited about it?
So actually, Cebu is home to one of the biggest exporter of preserved fruits. So they're quite excited about that because that gives them the because recently they had issues with having high tariffs in Korea and a couple of other countries. So with that, if the tariffs are as competitive, because now it's like Thailand and Vietnam exporting to Korea has lower tariffs, so they got priced out because of the high tariffs that it's being imposed on the Philippines. So if RCEP evens the playing field, that will be a big opportunity for our exporters. But at the same time, I guess our local producers need to step up their game, and that this is where our ease and cost of doing business comes into the picture. We're not just competing with our next door neighbor. We're now competing against the whole of Asia. So
Yeah.
otherwise
Yeah.
you get
Mr. Tria, you're going to say something?
Yeah, just to add on to what Kenneth said, no, in our case also, lower tariffs will be good for our pineapple and banana exports coming from Mindanao, especially going into new markets, no, the
Yeah.
non-traditional export markets that maybe the RCEP can open for us. But I'd still like to mention that agro-processing investments will even allow us to process more products and reach wider markets. Kasi ang limitation of fresh produce is that you really cannot export as far as you would like, no? Because there is a spoilage, there's a perishability factor. And so that's why having more processing industries are going to be beneficial. And that's what we look forward to.
Okay. Now, this is going to be my last set of questions. Of course, the government, not just the president, but also Congress. There are so many problems, or there's so many issues that they're looking at, right? But if there's only one thing that the leaders working in Metro Manila can do for you this year, what would that be? Mr. Ko was saying earlier that you communicate with them, but when it comes back, it's something else that comes out. But if there's only one or two things that you'd really like from the national government, what would that be? Let's start with Mr. Ko.
I guess you preface what's also going on our minds. So it's actually listening to each other. So
Okay.
That's really important. So having roundtable discussion like this or between government agencies is quite helpful, because sometimes the numbers and the actual things that are happening on the ground might have a disconnect. But when you listen to your constituents and you listen to different sectors, I mean, not just one sector, but across the board, then you, and I guess our leaders can come up with better solutions that will have immediate impact.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Tria, one or two things that the Davao Chamber wants?
Three things, actually.
Three, okay. All right.
Actually, more countryside investments. That will help also
More countryside
to
investment.
Manila, no? Kasi that will create opportunity. Then the budgetary support for the necessary infrastructure should continue, because that will lead to lower logistics costs. So these are the things that will really help Davao and Mindanao's businesses moving forward.
Okay. Just one quick follow-up. Because Mr. Tria, you mentioned that quite a bit. There are many things in Davao, fruits in particular. I mean, I love durian, for instance. I go to Davao, they're super cheap, super delicious. I buy them in Manila, they're like 400, 500%, more. We've had the cabotage law since 2016. That was supposed to make the shipping cost go down, and yet what is it, 9 years since the passage of the cabotage law,
or the repeal of the old cabotage law, no?
I'm sorry?
I think you're referring to the repeal of the old law.
Yeah. So I mean, it was we're talking about connectivity, right? I mean, what's missing? Why is it still more expensive to ship things from Mindanao or from Cebu to Manila than to ship it to say Hong Kong or Singapore? I mean, what's the missing link there?
I think the encouraging investments in logistics and transport,
infra,
with the amendment of the Public Service and Foreign Investment Act. I think that's why I mentioned earlier, we will need to see the implementing agencies implement this further, so that the investments needed in these sectors can be attracted and captured more quickly. So personally, I'd like to see government really implement this. Of course, these are economic reforms that were, I think, barely a year old. So we'd like to engage. That's why at the regional level, Regional Development Council, I think the specific agendas to push this need to be pursued, no?
Okay. Mr. Ko?
Yeah, I'd like to add to what John has shared about agriculture. Because we're also in the aquaculture business, and we have a small farms also. So And we've been wondering why China, Taiwan, or the other Asian countries have much better agriculture market. And aside from us having that high cost of transportation, we also need, I guess, with the problems that we're having with onion and other places, other commodities, I guess we need what we might say a smarter agriculture. So it needs to be, they have to form co-ops so that demand and production can be synchronized, and so that there can also be enough cold chain, so that, because there are some products that are only harvested once a year, so that they can be, because right now without that, it's the traders who are doing this job for us. And as you know, traders will always try to maximize their profit. So that I guess that is where government can come in and smoothen out the disparities between supply and demand.
Okay, Mr. Tria, you want to add something?
No, yeah, just to chime in a bit, because as an archipelago, there is already a natural disadvantage compared, for instance, with Thailand and Vietnam, no? That is basically one landmass and basically peninsular Malaysia. All you need is one truck to transport across borders. Here, there's an additional cost of handling, no? So yun siguro yung bagay, no, na we encourage more investment in to lower the cost of transport.
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I mean, I really appreciate. I know you're very busy, and we truly value your thoughts that you share with us. I hope that it resonates with our leaders today. But maybe before we go, maybe we can ask you for just some final thoughts and maybe a message to maybe either people from Malacanang or in Congress, or maybe in some other government department, if they're listening. Maybe what are your final thoughts? Maybe let's start with Mr. Tria this time.
Okay, basically, we'd like to invite the larger business community to engage with us. We'll have, let me just plug, no, we will have an investment conference in July, wherein a lot of what I discussed will probably be included in the content, and our annual Agri-Trade Expo, which is the largest in Southern Philippines. In September, in both of these events, this is where policy discussions also can be engaged. And I believe a lot of opportunity can also be obtained by many of those participating. So feel free to come over.
Yes,
and
thank
we'll
you.
Talk.
Yeah, and maybe we can reach out to you again before July and before September to help you promote those events. Thank you, Mr. Tria.
Thank you.
Mr. Ko, your final thoughts?
Yeah, more than ever, this current administration has shown its willingness to talk with the private sector and to listen to us. So, and now the private sector has also opened up to being more active in the participation in forming government policies and regulations. So it's not, we do understand it's not a short-term band-aid solution. So a lot of structural changes has to be made for us to be more competitive. And I would also like our government to also look at the ease and cost of doing business, because once you made this efficient, automatically investments and trade will just improve on its own.
Okay, Mr. Ko, Mr. Tria, thank you very much for your time. Please keep us in mind if there are opportunities that maybe, or there may be occasions when you want to share something with the Manila Times or to a national audience. We'd be very glad to do this again, either virtually or maybe in person. We wouldn't mind flying to Davao for your event as well. So again, thank you very much, and I hope that Malacanang and Congress are listening. And if they're not, maybe we should do this again so that they will. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Dada.